Hey, welcome to Tech Talk. This is Max Dennison from the city of Pittsburgh, digital coordinator. We're here for another Tech Talk. I have a special guest, Kirk Holbrook from Gizmology. We're going to break down Kirk's new position, what he's working on in the city, his vision and future for tech in the city, and just talk about everything in between. Kirk, want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, first, thanks, Max, for allowing me the opportunity to be on Tech Talks. I'm really excited to talk today about all the things you mentioned and the journey that got me here. Currently, I am the program director for Gizmology, which is a racial equity initiative embedded inside of Deep Local. We'll talk a little bit more about Deep Local, but Deep Local is a local creative technology company with a global reach. And through Gizmology, we're going to do something special.
Gotcha. Great introduction. So I usually start with the guest history, but I want to kind of start because you gave us a great intro into Deep Local and to Gizmology, and I'm not sure, but I'm gonna assume that the average listener doesn't necessarily know what Gizmology is and what Deep Local is. So can you give us uh, a layman's base explanation of what those two companies are, how they work, and how they're connected?
Yep. So first, Gizmology is a part of Deep Local. It is a racial equity initiative that is embedded inside the company itself. Deep Local is a creative technology company, and creative technology is like the blend of software, mechanical, and electrical engineering to create things that human beings can interact with, the blend of art and design. So Deep Local is one of arguably the largest creative technology companies in the world, and it specializes in creating experiences, human interactive experiences for some of the largest global brand companies in the world, like Google, Nike, Netflix, TikTok, et cetera. So Gizmology is a racial equity initiative embedded inside of Deep Local, centered around a creative technology apprenticeship program, specifically for Pittsburgh's Black and historically marginalized communities. The program is centered around 5 apprenticeship tracks, so mechanical design, integration technician, technical assembly, exhibit fabrication, and creative technology. That's what we call our software engineers here at Deep Local. And it's a 1-year fully paid experience. So apprentices will receive from day one, a salary of $45,000 plus benefits. And their apprenticeship program is a tangible way at providing racial equity here in Pittsburgh in the technology sector and providing a tangible pathway for young people to enter technology without some of the systemic barriers that often create some of these disparities that we see here in Pittsburgh and beyond. So again, as I said in my opening, Max, super excited to talk about Gizmology because not only is it something that's unique to our region in technology, I don't think that there's any tech companies anywhere across the country or across the globe that are taking this level of a tangible step to address racial disparities in technology the way that we are.
Got you. So let's talk more about that initiative. Is there an ideal candidate for that space? Is there an age bracket or age group? Yeah, let's start there.
So that's a great question. So let me try to answer that in a couple ways. So first, I want to stress that Gizmology does not require any advanced education or experience. In fact, it actually is specifically targeted to young people who do not have traditional 4 or 2-year degree backgrounds. So that's one. So we're looking to bring in recent high school graduates or underemployed adults who don't have traditional educational experience and provide this opportunity as a way of their foray into the technology sector. The ideal candidate really would have an interest in tech, but again, the background experience is not there, would have some level of interest in creativity, but again, it's not like they have to have a portfolio of work. I think someone who's, fresh out of high school, underemployed adult, I've been telling a lot of the community around the ages of 18 to 30, although it's available for anyone, but I think it's going to be a great opportunity for someone who is ready to leverage this year-long experience to then grow within their understanding so they could grow at Deep Local, but also grow in their pursuit of a career in technology. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity for someone who's willing to try new things, who understands that oftentimes failure is a part of learning, but that sees themselves not only taking on this year-long experience, but seeing this year-long experience potentially being a catalyst to a decades-long immersion within tech.
Gotcha. Thank you. So somebody who's, tech curious, they have an idea, or they've always wanted to be in tech,
Yep.
don't necessarily background or the paper to say that, but they, it's a curiosity of theirs. This would be a great position for them.
Absolutely.
In the position you're in, while we have this audience, who could help you? What organizations, what people could help you? And do you guys have a number of how many recruits you want to bring in?
So let me start with the second question first. So over the next 2.5 years, roughly, we want to bring in a minimum of 15 apprentices. And that could grow to, roughly around 20. And this is the initial couple years that of work and momentum that we want to build, right? What we are going to do, and this is a great day, Max, because this conversation with you also coincides with our official launch of our first application process for Gizmology. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in an initial cohort. The start date is going to be Monday, April 17th. Again, applications have just been released today, so we're going to bring in about 3 to 4 apprentices. And over time, so in the late fall, we'll bring in a larger cohort, roughly 5 to 8 apprentices. And again, we'll end with anywhere from 15 to 20 after our initial 2.5 years. What we need to be successful with this initiative is we really need to ensure that Gizmology's tentacles are spread deeply within Pittsburgh's Black and historically marginalized communities, really our Black communities here in Pittsburgh. As you know, Max, you are attendee at our meet and greet that we had at the end of 2022 on December 8th. And we had a lot of great organizations representing places like Manchester or the Hill District or Homewood or other places. So we really need community members, community leaders, and community stakeholders to be aware of what we're doing so that we can have young people, as many young people as possible, potentially access this opportunity. We also are working with local workforce training providers, working with folks from the city of Pittsburgh and beyond, and also working with our institutions of higher education, whether that's CMU, the University of Pittsburgh, CCAC, organizations like Partners for Work or the Neighborhood Allies. I think to create an initiative like this and then make it be successful or help it be successful, we need everyone's hands together, kind of working in unison to really, bring these opportunities directly into our community. I also want to mention our apprentice numbers. We're looking at 15 to 20 apprentices over the next 2.5 years. But the positive ripple effects that we want to create through Gizmology really have the potential to be limitless. We are already hosting tours of young people from local high schools like Pittsburgh Lions University Prep. They'll be here later on in February. We already have things lined up with local after-school programs that are serving elementary and middle school demographics. We want to have young Black students from throughout the city now seeing a career in technology and creative technology as a possibility. And that's also a beautiful part of what Gizmology is intending to build and undoubtedly will build with the support of our community partners, as I mentioned, and many key stakeholders across the city.
Okay, I have another question. So you said that Gizmology is based inside of a bigger company. Has this ever been done before, Kurt, or is this the first time, or are there other organizations like that, or is this going to serve to be an example of how tech companies should be embracing Black communities, Black and brown communities, or minority communities, BIPOC, whatever semantics we want to use? Yep. Is this going to be that, or is this being replicated from something you guys have already seen?
No, so this is going and intended to be the first example that I've heard of. I haven't seen anything like this, right? So I think that we are on the cutting edge of creating something that no one has seen here in Pittsburgh or beyond. And I think it is going to be a tangible, again, a very real world example of how tech companies like Deep Local need to not only embrace Black and brown communities, but also need to remove barriers to provide pathways for Black and brown communities to get in to technology. It is something that has been long overdue, and Deep Local and Gizmology is at the forefront of addressing these issues. And when I think about it, Max, we've known that Pittsburgh has long been a city that has told the tale of two economies, right? No matter what time in Pittsburgh's history where there was an industry that was thriving, there wasn't always equitable access to Black Pittsburgh or Black and brown Pittsburgh, right? And we know that that certainly is true with technology. I think in 2019, it was something like 35 billion or some 35% of the region's wages came from technology, but we still see this historical inequities in terms of access to opportunity, occupational segregation. And so while we all know this and we often study this issue, I think we are finally taking the steps necessary to counteract that legacy. And so, yes, this is new, and that is the beautiful part of what we're building here.
Nice, great. So let's shift, because I have other questions. So I want to shift a little bit and learn about Kirk Holbrook. You have a great bio, obviously a great resume. Tell us a little bit about what school you went to, or your connection to the city of Pittsburgh, and then you can kind of bring us up to now. I'll stop you when I have some more questions, though. But kind of, what school did you go to? What classes did you take in high school? Did any of those classes in high school or early college prepare you for your position now, or was it just continue?
So Max, I lost a little bit of the tail end of your question, but I got you. So I just want to let you know.
Okay.
And so Max, I think you know very well. I went to East Hills Elementary, just such as yourself. Frick. I know we went to Frick together. I had a good experience through elementary and middle school. However, in high school, my high school career was impacted, like a lot of young members of the Black community here in Pittsburgh and across the country, is by becoming involved in things that were in our environment that weren't necessarily conducive to our advancement or our success. So I went from a bright-eyed, highly intelligent young man to someone who wasn't able to finish high school and really found myself on a slippery slope to self-destruction. And so, having to get my GED at the age of 17 and then going through further issues that saw me involved in the juvenile and adult criminal justice system really exposed me to what was some of the things that really were impacting our community. And what I mean by that is I could see the struggles that I was going through and looking at that I didn't always have viable alternatives or viable options to change, right? There weren't always tangible ways to pursue economic opportunity. There weren't always things available to me, knowing that I didn't necessarily go through a traditional pathway. So at the age of 20, the age of 21, through the University of Pittsburgh, I was still able to get into college using my GED scores and SAT scores. And as a work study tutor, I had the opportunity to work in a local community, the Hill District, at an after school program, working with kids. I think they were first graders initially. And although I started at Pitt and I told myself I wanted to be a business and finance major, within a couple of weeks of working with those young people, I finally had realized that I had found a passion for my life's work. And that was working with communities like those that I grew up in. I grew up in Wilkinsburg. My family's originally from the Hill. I've been living in the Hill my entire adult life. But I realized that by giving my life back to communities like the ones I grew up in, I would give myself a second chance on actualizing my own potential. So for the last 22 years, Max, I've been serving communities in many different respects. I spent over a decade working in, coordinating and then running after school programs. I spent a couple years community organizing, going all around the city, looking at educational policy and where there were policies that were negatively impacting communities like those that I come from. I spent several years working in state government with the former state rep, Jake Wheatley. And then I most recently came from the University of Pittsburgh, where I was the director of the Community Engagement Center in the Hill District. So I've had a very, very non-traditional career path to get to where I am today. But really the constant has been that I've wanted to and have dedicated my life to changing some of the conditions that continuously cause many of our young people not to become the great young people that we know that they are, right? And so my interest in tech really has been highlighted and excited over, the last 6 years or so, and even a little before that, when I was looking into educational policy and seeing the disparities that exist in our high schools related to who has access to computer programming classes or who has biology teachers, even something that simple, right? So looking at these disparities and the future tales for what that means in a young person's life. Working at the University of Pittsburgh, I was able to build in partnership with many collaborators at Pitt and folks like Remake Learning and others, I was able to build a community-wide initiative from kindergarten all the way through adulthood to really help to address the digital divide and expose community members, regardless of age, to some level of technology. And so I think technology can be an equalizer in our communities if we are able to provide equity. Tequity was a phrase that I came up with when I first started working at Deep Local. I thought it was me, Max, and then I found out, I looked online, people already had come up with it. I was going to brand it, but that's really what Gizmology is about. It's leveraging the immense potential of technology in a way that ensures that there's equitable access for our Black and Brown communities.
Got you. Great answer. Great answer. And that segues into my next question. You can hear me good now, Kurt, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. Knowing where you came, where you're at now, there's a huge thing right now, obviously, with gun violence in the city. We obviously want to counteract some of those obstacles that you talked about that we all had to either face or be around, or if it wasn't us, it was a cousin or a brother. Yep. How do we draw more young brothers and sisters, specifically, knowing that less than 7% of the whole tech industry is people of color? How do we draw them in and get them interested, in your opinion? And then how do we keep them there? Because even the ones who I speak to sometimes, moving around, going to different panels and conferences, don't stay long because they don't feel welcome. Yep. You're from the city, both sides of it, the higher education side and the street, the community side. Yep. How do we get the young brothers in East Hills, the young brothers in the Hill District, Homewood, Wilkinsburg, Clarendon, and surrounding areas, in the perfect world, how would you get those young people involved?
Yep. And our young women in all those communities, yep, too. Absolutely. And so I think it's a great question, Max. And I guess the way I would start to respond to that, I think in a lot of ways, young people are a product of the opportunities that they see around them. And we have systems that are, for whatever reason, inherently inequitable. So that based off zip code, someone who grew up in 15208 or parts of 15208, the predominant parts, are not going to have the same opportunities as someone who grew up in a Squirrel Hill or Upper St. Clair and beyond. And so because there are those inherent built-in systematic inequities, oftentimes the potential that a young person starts to dream about themselves is stunted. So I think first we have to start by exposing young people to the possibilities that exist. And that can start by reaching into folks who are about to grow into adults, who are about to leave high school, right? So we can start to work with a select group that are already going through their maturation process. But I think it really is also going to have to involve reaching deeply into our elementary students and to our middle school students, so those seeds of possibility are being planted as quickly as possible. So I think to get people into technology, there's going to have to be a tangible opportunity, number one, and very rarely is there unless you have a certain background. But it's hard to have that certain background when your community doesn't have the same opportunities because of the systems that control those communities. And so I think we need to do a great job right now. If we know some young people that really have they all have the potential, but that are ready to actualize their potential and take advantage of an opportunity like Gizmology or others that undoubtedly will come about, we as a community need to ensure that we usher those young men and women to those opportunities. But we also got to reach deeply and start planting those seeds earlier. To keep them there, you asked me again about the partnerships that we need for Gizmology to be successful. I think we got to think about all the hands that we need in the pot for a community to be successful. So I think once we get a young man or woman into an opportunity, we have to be able to look at the whole individual. We got to be able to provide some level of mentorship, of wraparound service, for lack of a better term. That's not the best term, but we have to be able to track our young people as they're going through the opportunities that they're given. Because just like you and I, they're most likely not going to get it right the first time, right? And so once we're able to capture the attention and interest, then we have to continually work with young people to keep them on the right path, because it's not always going to be perfect and it's not always going to be easy. But I really think that those are some of the things that we need to do. And hopefully that answered parts of your question, Max.
No, absolutely, absolutely. There's no, every guest that comes on, I ask them that question, so there's no right answer, but just to get, a pool of responses to, that's the biggest question: the workforce of tomorrow. What does it look like? And where will we get the talent from? So no, that was a great answer. Great answer. Being that you work at a company that's seated inside of a bigger company, what do you think, if any, is the responsibility of the tech companies to be involved in this?
Yep.
So years of other joint tech companies that maybe you guys work with or Deep Local works with, where do you see them helping, and what do you think their responsibility is?
Great question. And again, I want to try to rephrase it. So I'm leading an initiative that is embedded inside of this company. And so there's a couple ways I want to look at that. So just because, as great of a leadership role Deep Local is taking in helping to build Gizmology and creating this opportunity and bringing me in to direct it, we would be naive not to think that there still wasn't and isn't work to be done on the company's behalf. Oftentimes, and this is very real to Deep Local, and again, this is real to our region, but it's pretty much real to technology in most places. Whether or not you have a racial equity initiative, that doesn't necessarily mean that your company is already diverse. That doesn't mean that your company doesn't have to confront the potential of implicit bias, of unknowingly perpetuating stereotypes. And so I want to commend Deep Local and everyone that I'm working with there, Max. I think the company is very unique in that from top to bottom, and that's probably not even the right phrase. There's just complete company buy-in, recognizing that there's work that the company has to do on its own. And from day one, when I've talked with my colleagues and talked with leadership about that need, there's been 100% buy-in. And so some of that looks like DEIJ training. That's the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. We just went through a training led by April Jackson from Women in Tech Pittsburgh. And I know that can't be the end all be all, Max, but trying to equip the company itself with the tools needed to create as welcoming an environment as possible for an influx of racial equity, where their current makeup of staff does not reflect that at all. It would be irresponsible for a company not to do that work itself, right? And so I think that is one great example of what companies need to do to prepare to have a an infusion of inclusion, right? I think Deep Local is going to set a precedent. Infusion of inclusion. I just made that up, Max. I'm rolling.
Yeah, boys, I got you. I got you.
But I think, again, it is we know that Gizmology, here's a beautiful part of it. There is no cap on its potential, right? And that was stated from day one. We know that we want this to be an example for the region, right? So we have 15 to 20 apprentices that we'll bring in for the next 2.5 years, right? The amount of apprenticeship opportunities, because their apprentices are intended to stay on at Deep Local and become a permanent employee after that year, there's not going to be a limitless amount of those positions, right? So eventually we want to leverage the training and the curriculum that we're able to build to potentially be a workforce training ground for other companies who are in need of those skills that our apprentices would learn. We know that robotics is really blowing up here in the region, AI, and there's certain components of what we do here at Deep Local that will undoubtedly be attractive to other tech companies. So I think there's a responsibility for tech companies to, once we do it right, to realize that they no longer can say it can't be done. But then also we can be an example to other markets just beyond the Pittsburgh region. I think really quickly, I want to highlight that the startup funds, a large portion of the funds to start up Gizmology have been supplied by Deep Local's parent company. So like many tech companies, Deep Local was purchased by a parent company in 2017. That parent company is called WPP. It is a publicly traded international global company with over 200,000 employees based out of London. They created a $30 million racial equity fund in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And some of those funds have been used to seed what we're building here. They already have indicated that if we can show success here in Pittsburgh, that Gizmology has the potential to go to other markets, not only across the nation, but across the world. And so there's a lot at stake for what we're building, but the potential is limitless.
Nice. And I'm glad you shouted out the bigger company, because even for the average listener, they may not understand how an initiative can be inside of a company, inside of a company.
Yep.
So no, I appreciate that. And shout out to the company for a huge donation of $30 million, I believe you just said. Unfortunately, in the midst of a tragedy, but yeah, and still it's a huge contribution, and hopefully it does go global. Next steps, Kirk. Where do you your initiative works? Obviously, you want to expand it. What are the other areas of tech, and also hypothetically, for people who may not come to Gizmology specifically, what do you see the future of that being in the city? And how do we help that as well? So just for the audience, me and Kirk have been talking over the last, I would say, month or two. And I think one thing the city is doing better is we are really getting to a space where we're going to build an ecosystem of Black and brown ecosystem of technologists who
You got a bit of a delay, Max.
Okay, let me slow up. Can you hear me?
Can you talk again?
Now?
Still a bit of a delay.
My bad.
You're not hearing you, Max.
Okay, give me a second. Let me catch up. Okay, we here?
Try again.
I wanted to catch back up. Are we?
You sounded better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yep.
You got? Okay, sorry about that. You got me, Sue? Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about that, Kurt. Yeah, well, I just wanted to, as we wrap up and we're finishing up the conversation, I was saying, we're building an ecosystem where more and more organizations are working together. And what do you see for people who want to get into technology, who may necessarily not want to join, Gizmology, or they're too old to join the beta builders or work with Andre Samuels at the Citizen Science Lab? What would you encourage them to do?
That's a great question again, Max. So first, I think it would be a benefit for anyone interested in getting into technology to realize that the days of it being mandatory to have a traditional education to access that opportunity are slowly starting to go by the wayside. I think that there's been a global movement to really look at skills-based hiring. And I think part of that is due to the fact that right now, the demand for technology jobs is outpacing the potential applicant pool. But I think there also is the recognition that often mandating that you have these traditional pathways creates a barrier and is a way of hindering any type of racial equity or ways of bringing in folks who haven't had that opportunity. And so I think people should feel empowered to know that skills are becoming paramount regardless of that educational background. And so I would advise folks to really look at ways to pick up the tangible hard skills that go into some of these careers as a way of being their initial entry or starting point. But I think also, and this could be done through Gizmology, whether someone becomes an apprentice or not, or all these other great, you mentioned great partners like Citizen Science Lab, or I'm thinking of, the great work you're doing, Max, at Beta Builders, or what Terry Smith is doing with Empower House. I think we have to, it's almost like an obligation to expose people to the multitude of opportunities that exist. I think often, and I've been guilty of that early on, when I think of tech or when I think of computer programming, it's, creating lines of code to build systems that humans will interact with behind a computer or within some type of program format. And oftentimes your work might be at a desk working, behind a computer or on a laptop. But I think one thing that Gizmology and the work of Deep Local can expose people to, and other companies that would get into the type of work that we're starting to build, is we could expose the multiple outlets that can be accessed in terms of tech. So it's not just something that is rigid and has boundaries that have to be followed. There are parts of the field of technology that really want you to push boundaries, especially now with the excitement around VR and AR. It's starting to go into a way where we want to kind of push outside of what's traditional and start thinking about what could be next. So I think it's all about exposure, and I think it's all about people recognizing that the possibility is really at their fingertips. Should there be an opportunity or some self-initiative to start learning some of those fundamentals.
Okay, and to kind of wrap up as well, talk a little bit about your transition into tech, right? So you were in a completely different space and you slowly initiated yourself into tech to where you have a position now of influence. Talk about that. What were some of the difficulties, if any, and where are you at now in your own tech journey?
Yeah. Thank you, Max. So first, I want to say that career journey I talked about is spanned nonprofit, governmental, higher ed, but the piece that was missing was the private sector. And I think if we're really able to crack the nut of opening economic opportunities to our communities, I think a lot of the things that really got me into dedicating my life to this type of work, we'll start to see some change there. And so that's what really attracted me to getting into tech from the private sector side. And I think it's one of the best moves I've ever made. Being in the tech industry, I think there's just a lot of beautiful parts to it that I didn't necessarily anticipate. I know you've come to the facility and kind of seen the layout and the space. And that's why we want to start bringing so many young people into, to tour. I think just seeing how the industry is unique in terms of what I normally thought of as office space, right? But it's an open space. There's, really no closed doors, no closed offices. Really looking at the multiple disciplines that kind of go into the work that's produced at Deep Local, how your mechanical engineers also know some level of software engineering, but they also may know how to work with carpentry or how to weld. I think those things have been attractive. I think it also has been a real experience that in tech and in this sector, there isn't any, racial diversity. There aren't necessarily people that look like me or have a background like mine. But that's why I believe I'm here, to try to change some of those realities. And so, again, this has been a decision that, I've been blessed to be able to pursue. So my own tech journey has been lockstep, hand in hand, with me building up Gizmology. I've been able to oversee some instruction for young people for so many years. I did a lot of that at Pitt as well. And so I knew some basic concepts. I recently have gone back to school to get my formal education at Pitt, and I did take an intro to computer programming class, and I was able to be highly successful at that class. I got an A+ because I sat in on the classes that we were teaching high school kids when I was at Pitt. But here at Deep Local, it's even other layers of what I'm learning, right? I'm learning myself how to utilize a breadboard, which is, the original circuitry that electrical engineers used way back before there were, printed circuit boards or some of the other things that they use nowadays. I've started to learn welding and woodworking myself. And we don't think of exhibit fabrication like welding and woodworking as having a technical type of subject matter to it. But Deep Local is exposing me that there is, right? And so I think my own tech journey has been influenced greatly by my role at Gizmology. And I think that the thing it has done most is expand my definition of what tech is and what technology can be.
Gotcha. Great answer, Kirk. Great answer. So, we've learned about Gizmology. We learned a little bit about your transition and how you see the future. Tech as a whole is growing in the community. I know you used to play ball. A huge sector, I always tell people this, if you don't specifically work with football in the city of Pittsburgh, you will not be successful at any youth initiatives as far as trying to get young men. What is your take on trying to connect the dots between athletics in the city? And then I would say even young ladies as well who play basketball and those type of things. How do we connect the dots between athletics in the city and tech? Because we know that, statistically, nobody's going to the NFL or the NBA. Maybe 0.0003% are going to go, so that the other 99% is going to eventually have to get a job. And I've always said, if you're going to get a job, go into tech because, it's sustainable. You can last a very long time in tech. How do we connect those dots?
Man, that's a super great question, Max, and it's needed. And I would say that's the same question of like, how do we connect athletics and academics? I've talked to folks like the leadership down at the Rebels. I'm really connected with the Homewood Dogs, and we had Dre and Bob Jones from Garfield at our meet and greet, and I got a lot of friends that are embedded in the Wilkesburg Tigers, and I think it's something that we have to do. And I think the way that we do it, hopefully, is we need to start building some strategic partnerships with our local youth athletic associations, right? So, maybe we could talk to Taiwan, in the Hill, about coming up. It's difficult to disrupt practice sometimes, but maybe there's ways that we can come up and do activities with kids. Maybe there's ways that as a field trip, as a reward, that certain teams can be brought into companies like Deep Local or other companies and experience some of these opportunities. Again, I think there's just a lot of beauty in starting young and kind of planting those seeds early. But I think we got to build those relationships and we got to build those bonds. And I think it could be bi-directional, right? Like, how do we bring representations of technology into the youth athletic organizations, but then how do we also bring those organizations into these tech companies, or expose them to learning opportunities that expose them to tech? I think those are things that we have to do, and I'm all here for building those type of relationships. You know, Darrell's doing a lot of work right there at Rec2Tech, and you know, actually, Max, what you're doing, that's a big part of the answer right there. While we have young people going to facilities like the Citipark facilities all throughout the city, how do we make sure that we have an equal emphasis on them building their fundamentals, you know, getting their jab step ready, learning how to make that precise bounce pass, but also looking forward to what's next in the future. And I think when we have tangible examples, let's zoom out a little bit and say, even it doesn't even have to be crazy long. It could be 2 years from now, it could be a year from now, and we got 5 apprentices from that program, right? We could actually bring them into one of your facilities, and now it's a very real, hey, here's an opportunity that you can access. You know, I'm already making X amount. My career trajectory and earning potential is this, and this is something you should explore too. So I think you're already on the cutting edge of that question and or answer to that question. And I think let's just keep bringing in more and more partners to the table.
Sounds good. Kirk, we're going to go ahead and end the conversation. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Deep Local, Gizmology, and WPP or WWP.
Can I give a shout out real quick?
Let you get the last.
All right, thank you. So again, today,
Absolutely.
today applications were released for the program. So anyone that's interested, please visit www.gizmology.tech. You can also find us on IG, gizmology.tech, Facebook, Gizmology. But right now we're opening applications. Applications close on Monday, March 13th. We're only taking 4 apprentices for this first round, so it'll be highly competitive. But we would love to get as many young people who are interested in this opportunity to apply and on board and ready to take this journey with us. Max, I definitely want to thank you again, Citiparks Rec2Tech, City of Pittsburgh, and all the great work that you're doing to help support Gizmology, you know, even as a community advisory board member, which I didn't get to talk about, and I missed that opportunity, Max, but I thank you. And I think what we can do is special.